Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back in the mix, in conjunction with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, and as you all know, the home of African-centered news and information, back to bring you all a great show titled Is Pan-Africanism the Enemy? So because we're going to be examining the latest of a number of attacks from the FBA and ADOS brigade. And so, family, we're going to kind of jump right into it, but you all know what to do. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and hit that notification bell. Make sure that you are a blessing to the show. As you always know, we're always looking for brothers and sisters to be a blessing to the show. So make sure you hit the Cash App, Venmo, and of course the Super Chat here at LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always, keyword always. Now, sometimes, not sporadically, but always betting on Black. But we're doing this show because I wrote an article on Medium, and the link to the article is, of course, in the description. So if you want to check out the article that I wrote, you can do so. Titled, I'm Blacker Than You, Examining the Rise of FBA and ADOS Movements. And part of the reason I wrote the article is because you have some people will say, well, FBA ADOS is about lineage and we're advocating for justice and reparations. But many of you who are familiar with the channel here at Bequaline Network and of course Lumumba Speaks, what we find actually, because I've interviewed a number of individuals, actually giving them a platform on, of course, our show, they never discuss those issues. It's, they just they're attacking Black immigrants, African immigrants, brothers and sisters from the West Indies. So this is a chance for us to kind of debunk. We know oftentimes if you follow any of the individuals who are some of the preeminent leaders or de facto heads of FBA and ADOS, they tend to actually live in a space of intellectual dishonesty. Dishonesty, of course, we even saw that when I brought some of the individuals on my platform where they just make claims that are completely averse to facts, that are ahistorical in nature, and then take umbrage when you make them aware of the fact that they're making claims that are, of course, inaccurate. So tends to be a problem. So, of course, we're going to do a deeper dive into some of these issues. One of the issues many argue, and I saw someone that was making a video yesterday where they said, well, why do you have a problem with me trying to delineate my lineage? And I commented and said, I'm not familiar with anyone taking issue with African Americans having a distinct lineage or ethnic identity, because we've always had a distinct ethnic identity called being African American. One of the misnomers that we tend to find regarding the concept and idea of African American, we talk about this intellectual dishonesty, is that this is a term that came into prominence in the late 1980s, right? The mid to late 1980s. Anyone who's actually a student or has a working knowledge of African American history will know that it's not the case. The term has been used as early as the 1700s, right? And was even championed by the African American journalist T. Thomas Fortune in the late 19th and early 20th century. So we know that is a claim that unfortunately is being promoted, but is adverse to facts, right? Also, one of the issues that I find is we tend to find a number of personal attacks being made. So I wrote this article, I'm Blacker Than You, and a good friend of mine who I actually went to undergrad with, Hassani Carter, he decided to take the article and posted at least a snippet of it on TikTok. One of the arguments that was made was, well, his last name is Lumumba. He's not an African American. Why is he commenting on these issues? He made them aware of the fact that I am, in fact, an African American. I changed my name several years ago, so on and so forth. One of the comments that was made was, well, he sold out, and I'm going to just read this directly. It says, he sold out his lineage by changing his name. I sold out my lineage by changing my name. And one of the brothers or sisters in the chat, in the thread said, well, so he was supposed to keep the name of his enslavers, that dehumanized his family and community and so on and so forth. And the lady says, well, he probably took on one of the names of the Africans that sold us into slavery. And they said, well, the name Lumumba comes from Patrice Lumumba. There's no evidence of that being the case. But this was an example not only the self-hatred, but the Afrophobia that we find that is extremely prevalent in the ADOS and FBA communities. A great example of this, of course, was when I did an interview, about a 3-hour-long interview with Afro Elite. And he took umbrage with the term African American. Why do we have to have African in it in any way, shape, or form? Right. And so we tend to find that this is an issue, this sense of Afrophobia amongst, of course, members of the ADOS and FBA community. Many of you are aware, when I did the interview, I actually had to end the interview because he had no care or concern. And I was new to the YouTube streets, as they say, right? Had no care or concern whatsoever regarding disseminating information that was ahistorical and adverse to fact. It didn't bother him at all. And I ended the live, talked to some elders about it later in the week, and I said, well, that's something that is unfortunately very prevalent in the YouTube space, where individuals don't care about factual information. They don't tend to have a concern with undergirding their positions with factual information or scholarship, right? So, I guess you could call it YouTube University. But here, of course, we don't engage in liquor store scholarship, right? We want to make sure that the work that we're doing, the positions that we're taking are rooted in factual information, not conjecture, innuendo, or a nebulous understanding. Well, you could tap in, Hassani. I saw your comment here. So yeah, you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Definitely would love to hear from you. A long time no see, but we could definitely chop it up. But yeah, I did an interview with him on my YouTube channel back in 2022. And I remember it's 2022 because that's the year I thought Ohio State was going to win the national championship. We had CJ Stroud. So I'm just going all around talking about how he's going to win. But we ended up doing an interview. And like I said, I was just taken aback by the intellectual dishonesty. Like, he just was making claims that were just adverse to facts. For example, one of the preeminent arguments, and then we'll get into the crux, of course, of the conversation I'm going to have today, brothers and sisters. But one of the arguments that he made was that Pan-Africanism was one-sided. And as a result of having a conversation with him, I found that he actually knew really nothing about Pan-Africanism. For example, he stated that, we should operate on the basis of race first. And I said, well, that's what Pan-Africanism is, right? The concept of race first. I said, are you familiar with Tony Martin's book, Race First, that highlights the UNIA and, of course, the work of Marcus Messiah Garvey? He was not aware. He says, but he says Pan-Africanism is outdated. It doesn't work. And what we should do is we should just do something called B1, because B1 is a more efficient term where we operate based on race first. And I said, well, that doesn't make much sense to me. If you are opposed to Pan-Africanism, which is based on the concept of racial unity, why would you then therefore need to, but you believe in doing something that's rooted in called being B1? I said, it makes no sense whatsoever. So we tend to find there tends to be a lack of understanding of what Pan-Africanism is. I recall many years ago, probably in 2021, Tariq Nasheed made a number of arguments regarding why African Americans should not be Pan-Africanists, and every claim that he made was adverse to facts. Extremely intellectually dishonest. He argued that, to be a Pan-Africanist, you have to move to Africa, which is not true. He argued that Pan-Africanists just want you to just give them their money, then they do with it we don't know what. Right. Once again, just claims that were adverse to facts. One of the arguments that we tend to find, and that this was a response I received from someone on my YouTube channel, was that Pan-Africanists are trying to grift or manipulate African Americans to receive, of course, financial support. And I said, well, I can think of two individuals who are part of the FBA ADOS community who have used Pan-Africanism as a way to make money. One will be Tariq Nasheed, Hidden Colors videos, of course, 1804, his movie or documentary film, 1804, The Hidden History of Haiti, right? And then, of course, Yvette Cornell, and she charges sometimes upwards of $10,000 to host conferences that are rooted around the concept of racial unity, right? Irrespective of one's ethnicity or nationality. So I say these are individuals who at one point found Pan-Africanism to be beneficial. Sister Shai, how you doing? Based on the fact that they were able to make money off of it, right? And so I think these are things that we need to consider. But this is something that I think is unfortunate, because what we tend to find, and I'll talk about this. So yeah, All for Truth, tap in. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Definitely would love for you to tap in. We could have this conversation. Shout out to the Gem City, Dayton, Ohio, in full effect, right? 937 for life. But once again, the link is in the description, and I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. So give me 1 second, and I'll put the link in the chat. So tap in. Just to let you know, you do not, as everyone knows, you do not have to use your actual name, right? You can use a pseudonym. You do not have to cam up. And let's go over the ground rules. So here at Lumumba Speaks Equaline Network, we accept diversity of thought. We do not believe in operating in an echo chamber in any way, shape, or form. So it doesn't matter if you're on the left, you're on the right, or you're right down the middle. You can come here and have a conversation that's rooted in factual information. Number 2, no racial epithets are allowed. No epithets of any kind are allowed. We believe in Black empowerment. We believe in the 3 N's of Black power: self-respect, self-defense, and of course, self-determination, right? So we don't allow epithets of any kind. Number 3, facts over feelings. So that means if you disagree with someone, you attack the argument, not the person. We don't believe in ad hominems. We don't believe in red herrings. You attack the argument, not the person. Then, of course, last but not least, we do not allow anyone to make a claim that is fundamentally adverse to facts. So, for example, you can't provide an opinion, but if you were to claim LeBron James is the greatest player ever because he won more championships than Michael Jordan, that is a claim that is adverse to facts, right? He did not win more championships than Michael Jordan. You can have an opinion, but you can't make a claim that is non-factual, because of course this is my platform and it hurts my credibility. So with that being said, family, tap in, be part of the conversation. We're discussing, is Pan-Africanism the enemy? Examining the latest attack by FBA and ADOS. I am, of course, Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba, progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction with Equaline Network, family, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, hit that notification bell, and make sure you be a blessing to the show. At, of course, Cash App us at Lumumba Speaks, Venmo at B Lumumba, and hit the super chat. So once again, family, the link is in the description, link is in the chat. Let's get this conversation started regarding, of course, FBA, ADOS. And of course, family, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my article. We can actually review it. And so this will give people time to actually tap in and be part of the conversation. But I will share with you all what I had to say, right? So, of course, it's on Medium. Make sure you follow me on Medium at Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba. I'm Blacker Than You, examining the rise. Let me see here. I gotta make sure. Okay. Examining the rise. Are you all able to see the article? Okay, there we go. Examining the rise of FBA and ADOS movements. So I've noticed that even some respected scholars and media pundits have begun to associate the rise and prominence of the foundation of Black America and the American descendants of slaves as being rooted in the raising of awareness regarding how African-American culture has been exploited and co-opted by people not of that lineage to wear Blackness as a costume. I find this argument to be specious, as this position is averse to facts and belies that the FBA and ADOS movements emerged as a mutation of anti-Pan-African sentiment by individuals who promoted Pan-Africanism for monetary gain until it was no longer useful to do so. We talked about this before, individuals such as Tariq Nasheed and Yvette Cornell. We also find this being rooted in Afrophobia, xenophobia, self-hatred, Americanized nativism, African-American tribalism, militant integrationism, intellectual dishonesty, and adherence to white nationalist politics. These sentiments developed in part due to said adherents having a surface-level understanding of Black history and culture, and due to the inability to effectively combat the ubiquitous nature of anti-Black racism in America. As powerless groups, unable to effectively change the forces that oppress them, they attack themselves or people similar to themselves. This is what is known as manipulative deflection, right? Thus, it is easier to attack those similar to oneself as opposed to entities responsible for the African-American community's social, political, and economic quagmire. More of these attacks are rooted in surface-level tropes of Black or African-American cultural appropriation, such as who created hip-hop or who ruined the Essence Fest, right? So, great example, and typically what we find that when they will create a problem, right? It's really a solution in search of a problem. We're going to create a problem and then make money off of it. But there was, while conveniently ignoring the powers that weaponize hip-hop as an incubator of profligate consumerism, normalizing dysfunctional social behavior, and prurient chasers of the fast life. Rooted in time-resistant anti-Black stereotypes, one of the major issues you can find with this is, but there was no discussion of actually who controls hip-hop. So this is one of the misnomers, right? We talk about most African Americans are doing the heavy lifting when it comes to Pan-Africanism. Most Africans don't believe in the concept. As someone who's been to the continent, someone who is a Pan-Africanist, I know that's not the case. If you're familiar with the history of Pan-Africanism, you would know that that claim is averse to facts. When we talk about, of course, the origins of Pan-Africanism, the success of the Haitian Revolution, right? The fact that numerous, and I think I'll even talk about this. Do I talk about this in the article? No, I don't. Numerous presidential administrations after Haiti's independence actually provided resources, right, for the transportation and housing of African Americans to resettle in Haiti at the tens of thousands, right? We talk about Henry Sylvester Williams, Edward Wilmot Blyden being the fathers of Pan-Africanism, right? We talk about numerous examples of brothers and sisters on the continent working to the benefit of course, of African Americans at home, right? We talk about numerous African nations providing political asylum to African American activists, right? Such as Libya, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Senegal, Guinea, Burkina Faso, right? Just to name a few, right? So these claims are averse to the facts, right? And they belie the history of the movement, right? We could talk about one of the examples was that Marcus Garvey didn't get anything popping with Pan-Africanism until he came to the United States of America, right? If you're familiar with the history of Marcus Garvey, you would know that that isn't true, right? Marcus Garvey, of course, began his Pan-Africanist activism in Jamaica. He was a mentee of Robert Love, who was a brother who was a Pan-Africanist, one of the preeminent Pan-Africanists in, of course, Jamaica, but he was from the Bahamas, right? And then, of course, we know Marcus Garvey also was able to engage in the Pan-Africanist work and the importance of controlling the press during his time, being mentored by Deuce Muhammad Ali, who was an Egyptian Sudanese Pan-Africanist, right? So we find individuals are making claims that simply belie the history of the movement, right? That's the issue that I have. If you don't want to be a Pan-Africanist, cool, that's no problem. Right? We don't go around trying to proselytize, but I feel that in part that it's my responsibility as a Pan-Africanist, as a scholar, as an educator, to, of course, correct the misinformation. So Smitty 753, you could tap in and be part of the conversation. Like I stated before, the link's in the description, link is in the chat. But this is the problem, is you have individuals making these claims, but they aren't able to substantiate them. Another example that belies the claim that African Americans are doing the heavy lifting, right, when it comes to Pan-Africanism. Malcolm X sought to file charges against the United States government in the United Nations for what? Crimes against humanity, for the treatment of African Americans here in the United States of America. Malcolm X received the backing of 5 African nations, and there was a referendum passed in the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union, in which they said, yes, our governments will support you in doing this. Most scholars argue that this is why Malcolm X was assassinated, because he became an international figure and he had support internationally from African heads of state willing to back him in advocating for African Americans in the United States of America. When we talk about the dismantling of Jim Crow, legalized segregation, right? We talk about de jure segregation in America, right? Many people are unaware that African heads of state, African diplomats took umbrage with the treatment of African Americans in the United States based on what they witnessed and also experienced themselves when they came to the U.S. on official state visits, and they advocated at the international level, right, for the dismantling of Jim Crow, right? Derek Bell, who was one of the fathers, of course, of critical race theory, has even cited this. So once again, the claims that people are making are averse to the facts. Okay, can't talk right now. Let's see, that's all nice, but how did it all turn out? Trust me, I talked to a lot of applicants and they would tell you their definition is different than what it is in the rest of it. So once again, tap in and be part of the conversation. You said that's nice, but how did it all turn out? So what do you mean by how did it all turn out? We also know that Pan-Africanism is seen by the West as the greatest threat to Western imperialism and hegemony, particularly economically, in terms of resource allocation throughout the world. There have been numerous coups by Western-backed companies to dismantle and disrupt African nations that were Pan-Africanist in nature, and speaking in terms of their governmental presidential administrations. So we can have the conversation, right? But as someone who has been to the continent, someone who works and does the work with Pan-Africanists on the continent, in the Caribbean, and of course, here in America, I would argue that the claim that you're making belies the facts. But once again, you could tap in, you could share your anecdotal conversations regarding individuals you had conversations with. But I would argue that what may have taken place is that you had conversations with individuals who weren't Pan-Africanists. But here's the issue, and this is something that happens a lot when you're having conversations with individuals who are of this ideology. When you provide factual information that contradicts what you've already told them, they still would just dismiss it, which tends to be a problem. So that's where the intellectual dishonesty comes in, right? Because factual information, unfortunately, tends not to matter, right? So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. We have a number of viewers on Twitter. What I will look to do is put the link to the conversation. I'm saying that's a good idea. Okay, but when we are doing a review on it, people are questioning. You even said that yourself. Well, yes. Well, my master's thesis was titled "Is Pan-Africanism Dead?" And so in there, I talk about. Matter of fact, I will pull it up for you, right? And we talk about why Pan-Africanism was seen as an antiquated model of Black empowerment, right? But it's not for the reasons that you're claiming, right? And so I've always stated there are real critiques of Pan-Africanism. The problem is that the critiques that people tend to make are not rooted in facts, right? So let's see here. I'm going to bring this up, family, and give me 1 second, and we will get this squared away. Okay, wow. So here we go. So this was my master's thesis, right? Titled "Is Pan-Africanism Dead? Examining the relevancy of Garveyism in the 21st century, the policies of Black self-determination in the Southeastern United States." So I'll start off this with, of course, the abstract. I wrote this in August of 2018. So since the 1960s, Pan-Africanism has steadily lost its currency amongst leaders and citizens in the African continent and throughout the African diaspora. During the past 50 years, Pan-Africanism has suffered a series of seemingly insurmountable setbacks, including the assassinations of prominent activists and statesmen such as Patrice Lumumba, Steve Biko, Malcolm X, and Thomas Sankara, to name a few. Furthermore, Pan-Africanism's flagship organization, the African Union, has had its fair share of challenges and criticisms, leading its detractors to call it a what? Toothless bulldog. Okay, so that's one there. Additionally, the growing disillusionment amongst Africans in the continent and throughout the diaspora towards an ideology that has promised so much but delivered so little has caused Pan-Africanism to be seen as an antiquated model of resistance to global white hegemony. This stance has caused many to question the efficacy of the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey in the 21st century, in which the forms of oppression African people face have evolved through sophisticated social structures that produce contradictory forms of consciousness. Moreover, the pessimistic undercurrent towards Pan-Africanism that permeates the African world leads one to ask the question, is Pan-Africanism dead, right? So why does Pan-Africanism need Black America? The Caribbean and Africa is close to each other, so that should be more than enough to people to actually get something started. Well, Pan-Africanism is alive and well on the continent. Great example that would be ECOWAS, the Economic Organization of West African States. We even had the Sahel Alliance as well. But Pan-Africanism isn't simply continental. Pan-Africanism is about the global empowerment of Black people. So what Pan-Africanism is about is, irrespective of where you are in the world, you should work to empower Black people. So it doesn't matter if you're a Black person living in Turkey, London, Canada, Mexico, the West Indies, or Australia. We should coalesce as a people to empower ourselves and build institutions that benefit who we are as a culture, right? And as a people. We find Pan-Arabism, Pan-Europeanism, Pan-Chinese. We find all groups of people do this, irrespective of where they are, right? Well, no. Martin Delany is the father of Black nationalism, but he is not the father of Pan-Africanism. For example, Henry Sylvester Williams is the one who coined the term Pan-Africanism, right? And we also find that most scholars actually trace the origin of course, Pan-Africanism to the success of the Haitian Revolution. So if we want to go do a deeper dive, we actually find that Pan-Africanism's origins lie in, of course, the Haitian Revolution, right? But that's some of the misinformation regarding what Pan-Africanism is. But what really is quixotic to me is the concept and idea that somehow this is the enemy of Black people, that an ideology that argues that irrespective of where we are in the world, we should work together to empower each other socially, politically, economically, is somehow detrimental to our well-being. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. None whatsoever. So these are some of the issues, right? And when I talked about in my article, this being rooted in Afrophobia, right? This self-hatred. We know Malcolm X stated many years ago, right, that you can't hate the roots of a tree without hating the tree itself. You can't hate your origin. You can't hate where you come from. You can have a negative view of who you are and where you come from, and as a result, have a positive view of yourself. He says the Sahel Alliance is actually something as a threat to Western countries. The other organization that you mentioned, people laugh at. Well, people, of course, people are always going to laugh at things that Black people are doing that are rooted in our own best interests, right? For example, I'm the director for Black Cultural Center. You have individuals who scoff at the fact that there are Black cultural centers in higher education, but we find that they actually work. No, and real quick, I never said that you said it was the enemy, but this is something that is being permeated through social media, right? I never said that you made this claim, but we find individuals in the FBA and ADOS community are now making the argument that Pan-Africanism is injury. It is the enemy. I'm just saying it's not working out. It's a great idea and great philosophy, but it's philosophy not improving the lives of people that follow it. Then maybe we should change it. Well, so I would argue, and I wish you could be part of the conversation. However, part of the issue is the individuals who claim that Pan-Africanism isn't working aren't Pan-Africans and have never been part of Pan-African organizations. I have been part of a Pan-African organization. I've been part of several Pan-African organizations. I can say from experience that individuals who are part of these organizations are doing better in life now than they did before they joined the organization. The organization I'm speaking of is a Coalition of African Unity, right? So, and when I like I said, I've interviewed individuals, they would say, I used to be a Pan-Africanist. I asked them, well, what organization were you part of? They can't name one. What initiative did you participate in? They can't name one. What program did you engage in? They can't name one, right? But I used to wear a dashiki. That's great, but that doesn't make you a Pan-Africanist. So I make the argument that oftentimes what's taking place is you have individuals who unfortunately know very little about Pan-Africanism and have never engaged in Pan-Africanism, then saying Pan-Africanism doesn't work. Right. So you say it may not necessarily be, but on a macro level, we find that this is the case. On a macro level, we find that most of our people, African Americans, have a rather demonstrative level of self-hatred, right? And this, of course, is rooted in, of course, the miseducation that we receive. Of course, we're citing the work of Dr. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, right? He wrote the book Miseducation of the Negro in 1933, and he talks about this. The education that we see brings about these issues, right? But once again, one of the major issues is when individuals say Pan-Africanism isn't working, and then I ask them, okay, well, can you give me an example of a time that you were part of an organization, an initiative, or a program that did not come to fruition? They can't tell me because they've never actually engaged in Pan-Africanism, right? There are numerous initiatives and programs that are taking place. I am part of let me see here. Yeah, but that's kind of the problem. Individuals doing better in life doesn't really reflect on a broader diaspora, almost like the whole Black excellence group. Well, I would disagree. So if you have individuals who are in an organization, right, and that part of the organization is to better the lives of African people, and if you're joining the organization and it's helping you do better in life, socially, politically, economically. That is a benefit. The issue is, how do we scale that on a macro level, right? So I'm part of an initiative where we are able to provide water filters in Togo that is able to improve the social conditions of the brothers and sisters in Togo. That is an actual direct benefit, right? So I'm not, I don't promote the Black excellence grift, because that kind of roots, Dr. Michelle Alexander talked about that in her book, in terms of, okay, they use this as an example of being overcome, of course, anti-Black racism. But if you are in the organization in which the goal of that organization is to improve the lives of Black people, irrespective of where they are, that should first start with the individuals who are in the organization. And then the issue is, how do you scale that in nature, right? And so I would argue, he said Mr. Beats. I don't know who Mr. Beats is. So yeah, I don't know who Mr. Beats is. That's the same thing which you consider him a Pan-Africanist. So I don't know who Mr. Beats is, but the issue would be, who does he identify himself as a Pan-Africanist? And then, of course, why, right? And the reason why I say that is because, so I don't know who Mr. Beast is. So I can't speak to that because I don't know who he is, and I don't like to talk about issues that I'm not cognizant of, right? Just out of, I don't want to be intellectually dishonest or disingenuous. But what we tend to find is there are a number of individuals, like I did a show with Dinus Demir about what are the core tenets of Pan-Africanism, because there were individuals claiming they were Pan-Africanists, had actually no idea what Pan-Africanism was, what some of the core tenets were, so on and so forth. So it's important to have an accurate education, right? Like I said before, I don't have an issue with people not being a Pan-Africanist, right? But I do take umbrage with people making claims about the movement, the history of the movement, that are versus the facts. And so this would be a great brief pivot. We did a show probably about 1.5 years ago titled, "Is Sexism Pan-Africanism's Achilles Heel?" And this was in response to a sister who, wrote an article. She was a feminist. She wrote an article claiming that Pan-Africanism had a history of sexism. So I would have to find out who Mr. Beast is, right? But I definitely would disagree with the concept and idea that he's done more for Africa than anyone, right, in history, right? In the article, she made a number of claims about sexism in Black organizations, but none of the organizations were Pan-Africanist organizations. Most of the organizations were integrations organizations, in which they were taking cultural concepts, parroting or copying cultural concepts from, of course, white America. And so we did a show on that, and we talked about throughout the history of Pan-Africanism, starting with Maroon societies, the Haitian Revolution, African independence movements, slave revolts, shipboard insurrection during the Middle Passage, that women always played a prominent role, not only in these movements, but also even in the leadership of the movements. And so we chronicled that throughout history, right? And to show that oftentimes, unfortunately, you have individuals who are making claims that simply are averse to facts. And part of it is because the individuals don't know the actual history, right? So these are things, unfortunately, that tend to take place on a regular basis regarding different ideologies, different movements, different concepts and ideas, particularly in the global African community, right? And so these are some of the issues, right? But I said one of the major issues is the intellectual dishonesty, right? You don't want to be Pan-Africanist? Fine, that's no problem. But we have a number of issues that we're facing as a people. And when someone is making a claim of Pan-Africanism as an enemy, or they're attacking other Black people, or we're facing issues on a diurnal basis, right, from individuals who are actually progenitors of anti-Black racism, it makes it hard for individuals to take, right, and people of that ilk seriously, right? Another example would be, the fight for reparations, which I think most individuals who are Black-minded would support, right, irrespective of your advocating for reparations for African Americans, reparations, of course, for Haiti. We know in Haiti there's a movement to have France repay the indemnity that had to be paid by Haiti to France as a result of them, of course, claiming their independence and destroying French property during the revolution, right? I think most Black-minded people would support that, irrespective of the person's nationality. Hey, if you're seeking reparations against what was done to our people from a former colonial power, have at it, right? We tend to find individuals with doctor, of course, media to show maybe a Black person who is not an African American saying I'm against reparations. Oftentimes, it's not because they're making an argument because they're Pan-Africanists or because they are averse to African American community development. It's rooted in the fact that they engage in politics. Typically, these individuals are conservatives who are seeking to ingratiate themselves with white power structure, which is something that we even find being done in the African American community. Right? We talk about Candace Owens, for example. We talk about Larry Elder, for example. There are a number of African Americans who make comments publicly that are adverse to the best interests of Black people because they're seeking to ingratiate themselves with white power, right? So this is something that we find irrespective of one's nationality, lineage, etc., which is unfortunate, right? But I am mature enough to know that is not representative of the entire group of people that they may be part of. And so we tend to find, like I said, these very surface level type positions being taken regarding Pan-Africanism, African and, of course, West Indian immigrants, so on and so forth. I can recall, but this probably was about 4 years ago. This is when around the time I first started my show, and I was on a platform with Dynas Demir, the brother who runs the African Diaspora News channel, was on, and we're having a conversation, and he was talking about he had an issue with brothers and sisters in Haiti, creating a little Haiti in South Florida. And I said, well, why are you opposed to that? How does that adversely affect you in any way, shape, or form? And he says, well, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm like, so why are you complaining about it, right? And most people are unaware of the fact that Haiti was the only country at the time who even had the capacity to actually provide an olive branch, to actually provide us an actual escape from the vicissitudes of anti-Black racism in America, right? Literally, for successive presidential administrations said, listen, we will provide the monetary capital for your transportation and housing in Haiti for African Americans. Dr. James T. Holly led a large contingent. We're talking about over 10,000 African Americans who left America and went to Haiti, and they're still in Port-au-Prince to this day. So a lot of times, just people don't know the history, right? And that's why I said we have to push back into the concepts of when people make the concept where it's one-sided, it shows how little they actually know about the history and Pan-Africanism as a movement, right? We talk about in Chad, for example, the brother who created the political party that led to the liberation of Chad was born in Panama. He was an Afro-Panamanian brother, but he was actually part of the head of the political party that led Chad to independence, right? We talk about, there's a sister, if I can remember her name, there was a brother who graduated from Tuskegee University, which of course is the intellectual institution built by, of course, the great Booker T. Washington. And then he was able to go to Togo and create a cotton factory. So once again, the concept and idea of it being one-sided is it's ahistorical in nature. And I know that's one of the talking points. I don't have an issue with people not being Pan-Africanists, but I think people who are intellectually honest would take issue with anyone making a claim that is adverse to facts in any way, shape, or form that is rooted in Black history, right? And so that's the position that is the concern. The other concern, of course, is this practice of attacking other Black people rather than the actual entities that are responsible for our social, political, and economic quagmire, right? That is an issue that I think a reasonable person would sit back and say, that's problematic, right? That is an issue of concern, right? However, much isn't said, right? As I said before, many of the individuals who consider themselves leaders of course, the movement, the concept, the idea, at one point were promoting Pan-Africanism and were making a substantial amount of money off of promoting the concept and idea of Pan-Africanism. But now, all of a sudden, so when we talk about someone grifting or leeching, that would be an example, right? Of someone grifting or leeching off of Pan-Africanism to make money and then pivoting and now actually engaging in politics that are rooted in white nationalism, right? We see a number of individuals actually who are advocates or promoters of the concept of FBA and ADOS now actually aligning themselves with Donald Trump, who is a virulent white nationalist, right? This is a man who in a Time magazine interview stated in April of 2024 that the only racism in America was racism against white people, particularly white men. There's no way in any way, shape, or form that you could tell me that someone who is interested in the best interest of the African-American community here in America would align themselves with a man whose politics are rooted in white nationalism. Makes no sense whatsoever, right? So I think we need to do a deeper dive, be more incisive, engage in a high level of critical thinking, right? To understand what's truly taking place, right? And oftentimes this is just simply, it's a distraction. It's a deflection from addressing the entities and individuals and powers that be that are actually responsible for our social, political, and economic quagmire, right? And one of the easiest things to do is to attack individuals like oneself or similar to oneself, rather than going after those who are actually responsible for the issues we face as a people. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation. I hope to hear from you all soon. And once again, the link's in the description. The link is in the chat. Hope to hear from you all soon, right? So tap in, be part of the conversation, right? Yes. So once again, you do not have to cam up to be part of the convo. You do not have to cam up, and you can, keyword, you can use a pseudonym to be part of the conversation. But definitely would love to hear from you all regarding, of course, is Pan-Africanism the enemy? We are examining the latest attack on, of course, Pan-Africanism about FBA and ADOS adherence. And of course, I think we're having a good conversation. We're kind of clearing some things up here. But once again, I think I would argue as a scholar, as an educator, and of course, as a Pan-Africanist, I'm always going to push back against misinformation and intellectual dishonesty. Just something that I think is unfortunate that takes place in our community on a diurnal basis. But, this is something, we understand, at least I understand, that when we're talking about fighting against anti-Black racism, I am aware of the fact that the enemies of our community are internal as well as external, right? And I think it is important for all of us to understand that our enemies are internal and external, and those enemies can come in numerous shapes, forms, sizes, and it's typically irrespective, right? Irrespective of one's nationality, right? Yes, we talk about, once again, pushing back against the concept of Pan-Africanism being one-sided. Many may be unaware that Trinidad and Tobago has produced more prominent Pan-Africanists per capita than any nation in the Western Hemisphere, right? Just something to, once again, consider. We talk about Emma White, who was an African-American. She moved to Opopo, where she was given a teaching position at a school established by King Jaja, right? Joseph Adeline from Guadalupe became the director of Mentally Second Hospital in Ethiopia, was even appointed Minister of Health. John Robinson graduated from Tuskegee and moved to Togo, where he successfully established a successful cotton business and school, which was supported by the local Togolese community, right? So these are examples, right, pushing back against the concept and idea that Pan-Africanism is one-sided, but people make these claims because they unfortunately do not have a working knowledge of what Pan-Africanism. They don't have a working knowledge of the history of the organization. So individuals then make claims that, of course, are adverse to facts. We talk about notable political figures offering political refuge. Robert F. Williams, Pete O'Neill, for example, were provided, political asylum in Tanzania, right? There was an international incidents where, as I said before, African diplomats were able to, of course, use their positions of power to, of course, help create a negative global image of America due to segregation during the height of the Cold War, right? This incident and subsequent political rancor led to, of course, the ending of de jure segregation. And we know this is true because there were U.S. cables released that stated that, hey, we have to actually desegregate because this is making us look bad on the global stage, particularly in terms of our fight with Russia, the USSR, Soviet Union, during the, of course, Cold War. Derek Bell, who's one of the founders of critical race theory, has, of course, cited this work as well in his writings, or he's, of course, transitioned. So there's a lot of information that's out there that's rooted, of course, as I said before, in intellectual, dishonesty. Well, so a couple things, right? We tend to find, we do find a lot of times that African Americans tend to romanticize Africa, right? And we know why that is the case, right? Due to, of course, it being our ancestral homeland, and of course pushing back against, of course, the anti-African, information that we receive not only via the media, but oftentimes K through 12. But I think also oftentimes if individuals do seek to engage in Pan-Africanism, they come away disappointed if they have a rather romanticized, as you stated, view of what Pan-Africanism is, right, and how it actually works, right? So, for example, yes, there is one that I could speak of. Brother Dwayne Omawale, who is our resident historian here at Lumumba Speaks and Equality Network. He's a Guyanese, of course, extract, and the organization that he's part of actually supports cash reparations for African American descendants of U.S. chattel enslavement. Right? That is their official position in that organization. There's also a Pan-African newspaper. Is trying to think of the name of the newspaper, but it's a Pan-African newspaper, and they as well support cash reparations for African Americans, right, who are descendants of chattel enslavement. So there are organizations and entities that support reparations for African Americans. As I stated before, most Black people who are Black-minded support reparations for Black people, irrespective of what country they're in, right? I would support, of course, France repaying the indemnity that they put on Haiti at the end of the revolution. And I'm not Haitian, it has nothing to do with me, but just as a Black person who cares about Black people, wants to see what's in, advocates for the best interests of Black people, that's something I would be in support of, even though, of course, it doesn't benefit me in any particular way, right? And so, as I said before, but I'm glad that you asked that question. But these are some of the issues, of course, that we find. Sister Farida, who, of course, is from Togo, she's a Pan-Africanist. She actually lived, if I remember correctly, in maybe, let me see if I can pull up the country she lives in right now. But the organization that she runs, let me see if I can pull it up, Sister Farida. Oh, my goodness. The organization that she runs actually supports cash reparations for African Americans as well. They actually launched their website not too long ago. Golly, I don't think I'm going to be able to pull it up. I do apologize, family, because I wish I could put all of this in the chat. Let me see if I could check it on my phone and bring that up, because I could put it in the chat. But that organization as well supports cash reparations for African Americans, and these are brothers and sisters who are Pan-Africanists, and they're based on the continent, even though there are some individuals that also do live here in the States, but they're based on in the continent. So I don't know. I'm trying to see if I can find a link to the website. I don't think I'm able to do so. So I do apologize, family, but I wanted to actually, let me see, maybe I'll find it this way. Provide that information to you all. And then put it in the link so that you would know that there are actually Pan-African organizations that support. And this is a sister who, a lot of her work is on what's going on in Togo, but she actually has a Pan-Africanist organization that advocates for global Black sovereignty, and part of that advocacy is support of cash reparations for African Americans here in the United States. African Americans who are, of course, descendants of chattel enslavement, right? Just see here, it is important to note that Russia today is organized under a capitalist neoliberal system. We can romanticize the anti-imperialist USSR today, but today's Russia is running with radically different goals. Overstood, but no one's saying anything about Russia. So that is a red herring. We're not discussing Russia, we're discussing Pan-Africanism. If continental Africans believe African Americans have an ancestral homeland in Africa, why is there no birthright citizenship? How does Israel how Israel does with Jewish people is all based on money. Well, I would disagree. We do know that there is, if you are an African American, you can well, any member of the African diaspora can go and obtain citizenship, right? And the reason why this is important, because once you have actual citizenship, meaning you have a passport, right, you are then able to, but legally in many of these countries, own land, right? Because of colonialism, many laws have created to prevent people who aren't citizens from owning land, right? But we know in Sierra Leone, I believe Nigeria, Ghana, etc., that you can actually own land, right, and become an actual citizen and receive a Ghanaian, Nigerian, Sierra Leonean, ECOWAS passport, right, and actually become a citizen. Now, I'm not too familiar with Jewish people that in terms of if you haven't been to Israel, you are still given citizenship. I don't know what that looks like if you're given a passport. I don't know. I can't speak to Israel, but we also know Israel was backed by the West, and financially they are doing very well, right? So that they're able to do things that oftentimes other developing nations are not able to do. But in terms of, yes, you could be African American, Afro Jamaican, Haitian, from Barbados, Afro Brazilian. You can go to many African nations and gain citizenship simply by being a person of African descent, right? Dynasty Amir, who is actually a conservative, he's a Black conservative, but his company takes brothers and sisters from, of course, the diaspora and takes them to the 2 different countries in Africa and has them go through the process. And he oftentimes posts on his YouTube channel, even on his Instagram page, when the individuals are able to go, they walk through the process, and then they're able to gain their actual citizenship. But one of the greatest examples just lately was Stevie Wonder, who we know was the R&B prodigy. Many consider him one of the fathers or kings of R&B. He was in Ghana last year, and he was able to, of course, obtain his Ghanaian citizenship. I was in Ghana last year, and I should have done it, but I just running around doing so much that I didn't take the time to actually make that happen. But I should have, and when I go back, I will. So that is just something to, of course, to consider, that you can go to a number of West African countries and obtain citizenship, right? And even some East African countries as well. So just want to make people aware of that. Well, I can't speak to Portugal. I'm not cognizant of that, but I'm just speaking to the issue, right, of what's taking place now. And but you also have to understand that for many African nations, they've only had independence and sovereignty. Well, in many cases, only nominal sovereignty in terms of flag independence, but not actual political economic independence because they're fighting against neocolonialism. But with that being said, I would argue for nations that are still fighting against neocolonialism to actually make that, provide an olive branch. I think that is commendable. So just something to consider. But we talk about many of these Western nations. I would consider Israel a Western nation because, of course, of the funding it receives from the West. They're in a position financially, right, where they're able to oftentimes do things that many developing nations are not able to do, right? So that is something to consider as well. But once again, there are several nations on the continent, right, in which you're able to do that. But also you have to look at the fact that oftentimes these are nations where the administrations are Pan-Africanist in nature, right? So a great example would be in Ghana. When Kwame Nkrumah was president, there were numerous brothers and sisters who were African American, Jamaican, from Belize, etc., who were working in the government of Ghana, right? We know he brought W.B. Du Bois. They moved to Accra. He had a home. He had 3 servants, so on and so forth. When he transitioned to the realm of the ancestors, there was a state funeral for, of course, W.B. Du Bois, right? I've even been to the W.B. Du Bois Center in Accra, Ghana. However, there was a U.S. governmental-backed coup, right, that took umbrage with the his Pan-Africanist government, the fact that they were not only making actual connections with members of the African diaspora, the fact that they were funding independence movements in other parts of the African continent. And so once they brought that government in, they were the puppet government that was being backed by, of course, The United States, they were anti-Pan-African, right? They were anti-Pan-African. So these are some of the issues that we're facing, right? Yes, yes, they did. Yes, MLK, yes, yes. Normally, yes, they did. They went to Ghana's independence in March of 1957. They sure did. So these are issues that we have to be aware of, that oftentimes when African nations are engaging in Pan-Africanism, it's a threat to the West. And oftentimes, on many occasions, the individuals are assassinated and replaced with many political administration, puppet political administrations that are willing to do the bidding of the Western powers. A good example of that would be in Burkina Faso as well. Well, once again, and I'm like, be easy, that dude. Tap in and be part of the conversation so we can have this conversation, right? But we are, this is one of the misnomers about Pan-Africanism. Individuals who are opposed to what's going on in Burkina Faso aren't Pan-Africanist nations or organizations, right? We're talking about uniting with individuals who are supportive of Black people, irrespective of where they are, fighting against anti-Black racism. We're not talking about uniting with Black people who are willing to be puppets for anti-Black racism and white imperialism. For example, I would never tell someone, go unite with Candace Owens or Larry Elder, right? These are individuals who are opposed to us unifying and progressing as a people, politically, socially, economically, receiving reparations. So that's one of the misnomers. Pan-Africanism is about unifying with Black people who are supportive of Black radical politics, not unifying with individuals who are opposed to Black people engaging in agency and self-determination. That is one of the misnomers that is being promoted by individuals who, unfortunately, take issue or umbrage with Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism say, oh, just because the person's Black, yeah, you're down for the cause. No, you find out what a person's politics are, right? And based on if their politics are rooted in what we would like to call, or like what I would like to call the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion, then you work with them to do what can be done to better the conditions of our people, irrespective of where you are, right? When I was in Toronto, Canada last year, I came across some brothers and sisters who were part of an organization. I should have wrote the organization now, I can't recall it. And they were doing work to help brothers and sisters, irrespective of their nationality, to what? Settle in Toronto, be able to do, and, be able to find work and progress socially, politically, and of course, economically, right? That's the argument. But it's about working with individuals who are about that life, not unifying with individuals who are not about that life. And we talk about this, for example, we talk about in the African-American community. The majority of African Americans do not embrace Black radical politics on a macro level. The majority of it is what we say is 45, 46 million of us. I would say less than 10% of us actually promote or support Black radical politics. So I wouldn't say, well, as an African American, we should unify with all African Americans. No, you work with individuals who are supportive of us, engaging in a Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion. It's that simple, right? Most of the politicians that are in positions of power are puppets of the power structure, right? That is a reality, even though they're African Americans. Right, we find the same thing on the continent. Where we're at now in terms of Black politics is advocating for and fighting for rightful governance. Right, so that individuals who look like us, who are in positions of power, so that we are able to have political self-determination, are actually doing right by their constituents. Right, so these are things to, of course, consider. Right, Jamaica was the first nation to institute sanctions against apartheid in South Africa. That would be an example, of course, of Pan-Africanism, Pan-African solidarity, right? So there's just things to, of course, consider, right? When we talk about a lot of the misinformation about Pan-Africanism, right? But like I said, this is, and I don't blame most people. This is really a result of the individuals who have platforms, right? Promoting concepts and ideas that unfortunately, are rooted in, of course, being intellectually dishonest. That's just the reality, right? But Pastor John, also, that example shows how Pan-Africanism is not one-sided, right? That was between Jamaica and South Africa, right? Something to consider. As we also know that in America, while there were sanctions against South Africa, the apartheid regime, of course, the Reagan administration sent cattle prods, right? Sent cattle prods, right? Was trading with South Africa under the table to support the administration. Well, I'm sorry, the apartheid regime. It's not an administration, it was a regime. So these are things to, of course, consider, right? So, like I said, oftentimes, unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation being promoted regarding Pan-Africanism, what it is, what it's about, so on and so forth, right? And as a result, individuals have to make the presumption that, oh, I should just go out there and unify with anyone. No, 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 no. You know, Destiny's Child. No, 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 no. You unify with individuals who are engaging and believe in the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion, right? Not with individuals who are opposed to African people actually having true freedom, justice, and liberation. And we know that in our own community, that's not based on a person's nationality. That's oftentimes based on a person's personal politics. And oftentimes, more often than not, when individuals are engaging that way politically, it's because they are seeking to have proximity to or access to those who they believe have power, wealth, and of course, resources. It's unfortunate. It's what we like to call selling out. Is what we like to call selling out. So tap in, family. Once again, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Yeah, we're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. We're going to hold it down. We're going to be part of course, the Black radical tradition of audacious self-assertion. But once again, family, the link is in the description, the link is in the chat. And I apologize, family. I was supposed to put the link for the Brothers and Sisters on Twitter a while ago, but I did not. So let me make sure I do this now so that we are able to square ourselves away. So if you're on Twitter and you want to be part of the conversation, you can. So I'm going to put this. So I'll just put the StreamYard link on the Twitter comment underneath, of course, the live stream. So tap in, family, be part of the conversation. Once again, be part of the conversation. You do not have to come up to be part of the convo, and you can use a pseudonym to protect your identity. Tap in, be part of the convo. You're watching LaMumbaspeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe you can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black in conjunction with Bequaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. And we're discussing, is Pan-Africanism the enemy? We are examining or debunking, of course, the latest attack by FBA and ADOS. And make sure you're a blessing to the show, family, by hitting the subscribe and like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Hit that notification bell as well. And make sure you hit the Cash App, Venmo, and the super chat. So great question. Are you against people because they prefer to identify as FBA rather than African American? Well, I wouldn't say I'm against people. I take umbrage with people who are making claims that are opposed to facts. I take umbrage with individuals who are promoting xenophobia, who are engaging in, of course, engaging in Afrophobia, right? That is what I take umbrage with, right? I wouldn't say I'm against anyone, but I take umbrage with individuals who are making claims about any aspect of our history that are adverse to facts. For example, I had a student once who stated, well, slavery, my grandmother said slavery was a good thing because it, of course, we were introduced to God. And so, of course, the presumption of that statement was that African people prior to our enslavement by Europeans did not believe in God, right? Which, of course, is adverse to facts. Right? This is not true at all. I mean, there were traditional African religions. We even do a actual whole show. We have actual series on my platform, on my channel, where we discuss traditional African religions and we debunk the misnomers, the misinformation regarding that. In fact, I have a great book by Dr. Daniel Boaz titled Banning Black Gods, where we're going to be doing a show in October about religious racism here in the Western diaspora. So my issue are with individuals who engage not only in Afrophobia, but also misrepresenting African and Black history. That is what I take issue and umbrage with, because numerous individuals who, of course, were enemies of African people engage in doing that, right? And so, once again, our enemies are external as well as internal. If a person can say they're a jackrabbit, for crying out loud, hell if I care. But if a person says I'm a jackrabbit because Black people never did X, Y, Z, I would take issue with that because they're making a claim that is ahistorical and opposed to facts. But great question. I do appreciate that. Great question. Once again, family, tap in, be part of the convo. The link is in the description. I will put the link in the chat once again. Tap in and let's have the conversation. Is Pan-Africanism the enemy? So we'll love to hear from you all. Love to hear from you all. As you all know, you can use a pseudonym when you don't have the camera up to be part of the conversation. You're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire. But what we do tend to find, unfortunately, with FBA and ADOS is that there is a desire to distance oneself from one's African history and heritage, right? I remember on my show with Afro Elite, he claimed, well, we don't really have any connection to Africa because our culture was completely destroyed during the Holocaust of enslavement. And I said, well, actually, that is a claim that's opposed to fact. As someone who has a background in Black studies, bachelor's, master's, and even a PhD, we find that there are numerous forms of African cultural retention in African American culture. Right. And so once again, that was a situation where the person, of course, he's a lay post, he's not a scholar such as myself, was making a claim about African American culture and history that was simply adverse to facts. So I started naming literature. Right. We talk about Tracing Our Country Marks by Michael Gomez, the formation of African American identity in the colonial antebellum South. Myth of the Negro Past by Melville J. Herskovitz, Slave Community by Sterling Starkey, Slave Culture by John Blassingame, right? So, and I said there are numerous. Matter of fact, if many of you watched our intro video, right here on the Lumumba Speaks and Beacon Network, there's a snippet on that intro video where I lay out about 12 books on African cultural retention and African American culture, right? And I'm like, yeah, that's just not the case whatsoever. I provided factual information to debunk his position. And he didn't care. He said, I don't care. I'm just still going to promote this anyway. So once again, it really makes me question what is the overall goal when individuals are knowingly and willingly and intrepidly providing information that they know is not true. It's almost like Hebrew Israelites. They make a number of claims that are ahistorical. And the basis of that is seeking to what? Disengage themselves with African history and heritage. We find this with brothers and sisters who are what we like to call pretendians, right? Where we claim that they're actual Native Americans. It's rooted in what? I want to be anything other than African. We even find this in some of our contemporary college students who would claim that they're queer rather than Black. Anything better is better than having a Black identity. So they would claim that they're queer, which has nothing to do, of course, with a racial identity, but that's an identity they would take on that's more salient because they're seeking to, in some way, shape, or form, escape the vicissitudes of anti-Black racism, not only in America, but throughout the world. Be easy, that dude. What's the word?
Hey, what's good with you? How you doing?
I'm doing quite all right. Thanks for asking. Hold on. Let me turn my volume up a little bit because I'm not hearing you too well. Can you say something again now?
Mic check. Could you hear me?
I hear you much better.
Okay. Is it on my end or what?
Well, it was my end. It was my end.
Could you still hear me?
Yes. It was my end, not yours.
Okay, got you. I just want to confirm. Yeah, so pretty much I like to have discussions more so than debates. Typically debates should be moderated in some sort of structured format. So I just wanted some clarity on some certain things. And since you happen to be a scholar, maybe you could unpack some of the things that are out there. So not all of the sentiments are just mine, me personally. So let me just start with this. What does the term African American mean to you?
It's a great question. Great question. So for me, African American means someone who, of course, is of African descent, Black African descent, and who is a descendant of the transatlantic slave trade, enslaved Africans and their descendants in America. But now,
Okay.
from a scholarly standpoint, African immigrants who come to the United States now from an academic frame of reference are considered American Africans. That's the actual term that's used in the academy to distinguish them from actual African Americans.
But since you know most people are not academicians, right? They're not using that type of terminology. And this is where a lot of the delineation process comes in and things get a bit convoluted. And some people try to say, hey, we're all black. And then they do a bit of a one drop rule in a sense that, like, if this person has a drop of African, we have to accept them, even though that particular ideology was struck down in courts, right? So the reason why I'm asking,
what do you mean?
in terms of saying, you know, how they would discriminate against people for having the one drop rule. Because they would say any person that has a drop of African ancestry
Right.
is
Yeah, you're
considered
talking about the one
black.
drop rule in America. So you're saying
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it was struck down in court? When did that take place?
I don't know if it was necessary. Let me finish my point, and I'll give you the reference that I was saying. But the reason why I was saying that is because now people are doing that. They're doing like a one African ancestry drop, and some people are saying that if anyone, you know, because they have the guy in New York now, Zoran Mandani, right?
Yeah, he's Indian. He's Indian.
Yeah, he's Indian, but they have a lot of people under the banner of air quote African American that are defending him and saying that he righteously should have checked that off. That's why I was asking you. Of course, they got a bunch of non-black people saying, "What's the big deal? You shouldn't even matter. Stop complaining. There's bigger fish to fry." So, could you speak on that? And I'm gonna get you that.
I think that's a great point. So,
and is he African American to you?
No, of course, he's not an African American. He's Indian. I mean, but so here's one of the issues that we tend to find. And now that would be an example of non-black people wearing blackness as a costume, right? It went viral a couple of years ago, and particularly in the academy, where there was another Indian individual who, to get into medical school, masqueraded as a what, African American. He cut his hair. He was staying out in the sun a lot to get darker, and then he tried to change his accent, and he was able to get into law school, right? Of course, I don't agree with that, right? I don't think anyone would. But typically, the reason why we would identify ourselves as African American is for two reasons. One, as a result of the transatlantic slave trade, we aren't able to distinguish any actual nation state that we derived from, right? Now, on the other hand, brothers and sisters from the West Indies or from the continent, they were Sudanese American, Jamaican American, Haitian American, etc., because they are able to actually distinguish from an actual frame of reference that they came from, particularly nation state, before they came to the United States of America, right? And we know that African Americans are the only racial or ethnic group in America that involuntarily came to America. We are the only group who involuntarily came here. So that is something to consider as well. But yeah, I did see that where the guy who's running for mayor marked himself as an African American, right? We see, and oftentimes people do this for political expediency, right? Elon Musk, for example, we saw in South Africa where the white Afrikaners will all the time say, we're not African, we're Afrikaners, right? Distinguishing themselves from Black Africans. But then on the international stage, and they would say, well, I'm South African, I'm an African person just like you, right? So typically we find individuals doing these things for political, social, economic expediency. But then once the issue has died down, to go back to, I'm not Black, I'm not African, I'm something completely different.
But there are Black melanated people that do that as well, and this has been happening for decades.
Wait. So you said there are Black people who do what as well?
Go and first, hold on. So what I was referring to was Loving v. Virginia of the 1967. It doesn't explicitly talk about.
I'm familiar with the case. That's what made it legal for that. That's what legalized interracial marriage in America.
Correct. It banned interracial marriage and, you know, a lot of the racial purity standards, which was including the one drop rule. So there's a lot of things that happen, and even though it may not explicitly be written in black and white. And what I was saying is that in Clarence Thomas, regardless of what people feel about him, I know in some of his writings of the striking down of affirmative action, which, you know, I wasn't cheering for that, but my people wasn't the beneficiary of
Primary
that.
beneficiaries, right?
Correct. So I wasn't against that, but it just was what it was. But he talked about how it was unfair, and this is where he was drawing the distinction of lineage, of saying that someone from an affluent background in Nigeria could come and be under the banner of African American and be I guess like
He said that in his writing, because I'm not
no
familiar
no
with
no
what they
no no I'm not saying he said that specifically, but he was he did allude to a point of I don't know which writing it was, like I don't have it in
because
front
I'm
of me.
familiar with his writings where he made the argument that white people were being discriminated against.
No,
That's
I'm
why he
sure.
was opposed to it.
No, I'm sure he did, and forget Clarence Thomas out of there, because we already know this happening. If you look at a lot of the higher education and all this stuff, there's a lot of people that come from a they immigrate here, they come from a wealthier background, and then they take benefits of being African American, but then they also themselves, like you said, Mondamni will say he's African American, but no, he's Indian. There's a lot of people that come and say, I'm African American on paper to get the benefits, but I'm not.
Right.
I'm not black. I'm Nigerian. I'm not black. I'm Haitian.
So let me hold on. Let me ask you this question. So you said a lot of people would do that. They would claim to be black on paper when it's expedient to do so. Could you provide an example?
An example of people being black on paper.
A black person who will claim to be black when it's expedient, but then after receiving whatever said benefits will claim that they're not black. Because that's what you stated.
Yeah, so I'll say in the instance of, and it's not about them not really claiming they're not black, it's about them leaning into a different lineage, them delineating themselves.
No, wait. That's what you said. So now you're moving.
Okay, so I'll say Zoe Saldana.
Zoe Saldana. Okay. What about her?
She went through her life doing a lot of black roles, even wearing blackface. And then as soon as it's time to be honored and commemorated, she leans into her being a Hispanic immigrant.
Well, so two things, right? One, she hasn't, from what I've known, she's never cosplayed as an African American, right? Two, she's always been in relationships with white men, almost her entire professional career.
She put on blackface and a prosthetic nose.
Right, but that's called acting. Hold on, but it's called acting. Right? It's called acting. She's an actress. That's what actors do. Just like when
all actors don't paint their face like that.
Right, but they do wear makeup. But a great example of this would be in the movie I Think I Love My Wife. The sister, what is her name? That sister, she's from Philadelphia. She's a soul singer. They actually had her wear a fat suit. Right? This is something that happens, but she's never cosplayed and claimed that she was an African American. Now, she may have played roles that required her to wear prosthetics, but that's because she was acting. That was part of the role. But she's always claimed to be an Afro-Latino, and she's always been in relationships with white men.
So you're saying no one ever called her an African American? That was never.
What I'm saying is there's no evidence of her claiming to be an African American.
Well, there is evidence of Candace Owen, who claimed to be African American, but then she also claimed to be Caribbean, and she also said she has a bias against criticizing against Caribbean.
Candace Owens, and this is respectfully, but Candace Owens is a self-hating black person. We all know this. Right. The second issue about Candace Owens is she's from the Virgin Islands. The Virgin Islands is a U.S. territory. And if one is from the Virgin Islands, like Tim Duncan, that would make one a African American. I've been to the Virgin Islands, beautiful islands, but if you are from the Virgin Islands, which is U.S. territory, that would make you an African American. However,
but what I'm saying, my point wasn't that they're not African American. I was saying that some people like to use and discard the term, and that upsets people, where they're like, hey, if you're going to delineate and say that you're Caribbean, then just do it all the time. So when she filed that lawsuit with the NAACP, she did that as an African American. And then
Right.
when she's doing, she had a brief modeling stint. Caribbean. She just recently said she has a Caribbean bias. If someone brings her a story about Caribbeans, she won't criticize them, but she'll criticize Black Americans.
Well, but
She sees it as a
hold on,
different
hold
culture.
on. But part of her criticizing African Americans, and that's the term that we use here on this platform, is because she's what? She's pandering and doing the work of white conservatives. Any Black person who is a Black conservative that goes on Fox News, PragerU, so on and so forth, they speak ill of Black people. What's the sister? What's that Black chick? She's a cousin of Damon Dash, Stacey Dash, right? Once she started speaking ill of Black people, Fox News hired her. And every time they brought her on the show, she's speaking ill of Black people, African Americans, even though she's an African American. Then she became so deluded that when she married a white guy, there's a domestic violence incident. The police officer asked her, "What is your race?" She says, "I'm a white person." And as soon as they didn't have any use for her
Is she
anymore,
African American or Latina?
yes, no, she's African American.
Okay.
Right, but what I'm saying is, so there are two types of Black conservatives. You have organic Black conservatives, people like Booker T. Washington, that actually believe practicing conservative social and sometimes political values will be beneficial to Black community. You have inorganic Black conservatives, which is typically what we see nowadays. These are individuals who oftentimes paid by white conservative special interest groups to promote anti-Black sentiment on their platforms. I have 2 books on it, right? So nowadays, when you find Black conservatives, all they ever do is talk bad about Black people. It doesn't matter what their nationality, what their ethnicity is, what country they grew up in. Their job as inorganic Black conservatives is to speak ill of Black people. That's the reality. Matter of fact, there's one sister. She's an African American. She was from Baltimore. She was running for like state representative. She didn't win, and she went on. There's a show that Mark Lamont Hill hosts, and she was talking about how, in Africa, there are some countries in Africa that aren't doing well, like the Congo, and they were never colonized. So that just shows you Black people are dysfunctional. And he's like, no, the Congo was colonized by Belgium, and they committed a number of atrocities in Belgium. What are you talking about? But once again, these individuals tend to be uneducated, and their job is to go out and speak ill of Black people, period. That's all they're paid to do. So we have to put that in context.
And let me ask you this too.
But can you acknowledge that?
Oh yes, I was bringing up an example because you asked for an example. I never said I agreed with Candace Owens. Yeah. I have more harsher language that I use towards her, but I'm just being respectful of your platform. Right, Another one that I would like you to expound on is: are you familiar with the Congressperson Ilhan Omar?
Ilhan Omar. Isn't she from Minnesota by way of Somalia?
Correct. So, adhering to the term, she's African American, right?
No, she's not. She's not. She's Somali American.
No, this is what I'm saying. How it gets convoluted. So that's why I just want you to expound.
No, it doesn't get convoluted. If you go on her congressional website, it says Somali American. It doesn't even say African American.
But what I'm saying is, you're speaking as a scholar. There are plenty of people that do call her African American.
But here's the thing. So there's 2 things. There's a difference between what someone actually is, what someone identifies as, and what someone else calls them. For example, I'm a Pan-Africanist, I'm a PhD, and I'm an atheist. But I've had people call me a Muslim. I don't identify as a Muslim, never have, right? I can't control what people call me. But we have no control over that.
But what we do, but you're saying that, but on one hand, you're calling yourself an African American, right? And then when you go to the census and check the box, Ilhan Omar, who you're saying is not an African American, she's gonna check the same box as you.
Wait. It says, on the census it says Black or
it says Black or African American. Yeah. It does that.
And there's a reason for that, because on the census
it's the same box.
Yes, because it's not based on ethnicity, it's based on race. Right? Just like when you look at crime statistics, it doesn't say, well, are you a Norwegian American or are you a German American? It just says white.
When Somalis do crime in Minnesota, they don't say Somalis doing crime. They say Black people doing crime.
Right, and they do that with everybody.
Exactly. So we're being lumped together as the same. That's the whole point. You're saying it's different, But once you check the box, it's the same as you. You're trying to convince the world that it's not, but we're checking the same box that it's the same. Is that not true?
I think you're conflating two things. You're conflating race in America and ethnicity, right? There are two different things. In America, with everyone, not just Black people. You could be Latino. Matter of fact, I got a great book here titled "Inventing Latinos."
I know about that, making up Hispanics. I'm not saying we're the same ethnic group or anything like that. I'm just saying how
America.
You said it wasn't convoluted.
In America, because it is in America. If you check the census, it's going to say white, Asian, Pacific Islander. Right? Not all Asian Pacific Islanders are the same. We have an APETA Center here at Sac State, right? It's going to say Hispanic. Not all Hispanics are the same, right? It's going to say Black, and it may say something else. That's just based on the census, so they can know what percentage of the population is of a particular racial background. That's just what it is. I don't see what the problem is.
So the problem is like I was saying, it goes back to that whole Mamdani thing of people saying, oh yeah, he can check this because he's Ugandan and that's in Africa. That makes him African American.
He's Indian. He's Indian. But here's the thing.
I get it. That's where I said it gets conflated and convoluted. I'm not saying I agree with that.
But here's the thing. Anyone can check any box they want on the census. That's a reality. People, because nowadays you can check any. I could check white if I want to, and nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to go to jail. I'm not going to lose my job or whatever. I could identify as a tree if I want to. Doesn't change anything. So once again, this is an issue that has no end because there's nothing you can do about it. On the census, it's based on race. It's not based on ethnicity. It's not based on national origin. It's based on race. They group all white people together, all Asians together, all people from Latin America together, all people from Asia and the Pacific Island together. They do it with everyone, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, that doesn't mean that when it comes to allocation of resources, that is based on that. It doesn't mean that when it comes to reparations, that if the person identifies as Black and they're not an actual African American who's a descendant of chattel enslavement, that they will receive reparations. No, that's completely different. So once again, it's like an argument that goes nowhere. Now, to see if it was coming to actual research.
You said it's different, but you haven't drawn you didn't really draw a distinction, though.
A distinction regarding what?
Of saying this person is not African American.
I said that when we began the conversation, that she's Somali American. If you go on her congressional,
Somali is where?
In Africa.
So, like I said, that's where.
No, because obviously you're not listening.
So you're saying that the census. You saying the census is drawing a distinction between your African Americanness and Ilhan Omar's African Americanness.
Well, but one, she's not African American. She's Somali American. I don't know.
So hold on. Okay, hold on. So you're delineating and calling her Somali American. So why do we stop at Somali? Why don't we call more people Haitian American and Jamaican American? No, actually, we don't. The same people you call Jamaican American, you say that they're African American.
No, I don't. Hold on. Wait, stop.
I'm not saying you. And when I said you, I didn't mean you specifically. So I was speaking in general. So let me just clarify because I don't want to make it seem like this is personalized towards you. This is just a general discussion, you know.
But here's the thing: we can't control what other people do. We can't control that. If somebody gets we can't control that. But what I'm stating is, if you like, I'll pull up a website right now. Oh my! It's going to say Somali American.
No, I agree because she was in Minnesota and basically she knows that she's Somali. There's a video of her in a secret meeting where she was saying that they want to maintain power between Somalis, and they specifically said that they were going to shut out African Americans and white people.
Do you have a clip to that video?
That I don't have, but I seen it on Twitter. I could find it, but I verified it with my own eyes. Yeah, no, it's I mean, you don't have to believe me, but it's
Right,
facts.
I would need to see it. But as I said it before,
and why would it be hard for you to believe when you know that once these groups come over, they're trying to consolidate power within their ethnic group,
well,
not within a
because
racial
the
group?
reason why is I can say that as someone who's a scholar and an academic, someone who has worked with different brothers and sisters from different countries, so on and so forth, I haven't found that to be the case. Someone who's done research on this topic, actually scholarly research, someone who's published peer-reviewed articles in academic journals, who's gone across the country, I haven't found that to be the case. So, and as I stated,
well, if you got an email, I'll definitely send you the video.
Let me finish. There was an example of Tariq Nasheed. He's out on Twitter. He says, well, they're having secret meetings where they're telling people da 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 da. So someone came in and said, well, listen, you know, I'm a skeptic. I'm from Missouri. Show me state. If it's a secret meeting, how do you know about it? And he wasn't even able to provide a retort. So a lot of these claims are being made, but aren't able to be what? Verified or substantiated.
Well,
right?
This one could be verified. And
so like I said, you can send a link. I will put my email.
Yeah, let me get that. And speaking of that, I mean, did you hear about with that Latino meeting in the city council with Nuri Martinez and everything?
Yes, I did a show on that, but now you're moving the goalposts.
I'm asking you. That was a secret meeting that got exposed.
So it wasn't a secret meeting. It was just a phone call.
I'm saying it was a private meeting and it was secretly recorded.
It was a phone call that was recorded where the Latino woman was using Latin racial epithets against, of course, about Black children and Black people. Yes, I did a show on that. That was in October, I believe, of 2022. Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. So you are acting like it's unfathomable to think that some other group would do that. And
I'm not acting that it's unfathomable, but what I'm saying is people have always made this claim and never provide evidence to substantiate it. When we make the claim about Latinos, like I've written literature on the global nature of anti-Black racism. We find anti-Black racism actually beginning with Jewish people and Arabs during antiquity, not with white folk, right? So I'm well versed in the history of anti-Blackness. Right. But once again, what we then tend to find is the argument is that, well, our real enemies are other Black people who aren't African Americans, not the entity that has created our social, political, and economic quagmire for over 400 years.
But are people saying that they're the other? They are the enemy simply because it's non-American, or is it because they've shown something?
No, like that's the claim. Simply because they aren't an African American.
I see. I haven't seen that. I've seen people calling out people. So this is the thing. We have our own homegrown terms that we call sellouts here. One of them rhymes with spoon, right? There's other people of the diaspora that are spoons, but they have different names for it. But then when you call them that, suddenly people start clutching pearls. So nobody has a problem.
What do you mean by clutching pearls?
Because there's certain terms that people say, "Oh, don't use this term because it's divisive."
But I'm glad you mentioned it. But the issue isn't a person's nationality or ethnicity. The issue is the fact that the person is a sellout. That has nothing to do with their nationality or ethnicity.
I agree.
Politics. We have spoons in our community. So it has nothing to do with their nationality.
No, my whole thing is call them all out. So I agree with that. I don't specify and say, hey, let's target a specifically geographical location.
But that's what's going on.
And I don't agree with that.
Okay, very good. Mr. Sandman, what's the word?
Hey, what's the word, Dr. Lumumba?
Happy Pan-African Friday, brother.
Hey, happy Pan-African Friday. I'm always the one to
real quick, Mr. Sandman. I got something for you. You're my man from the Illidale, and I always got to do this when you tap in. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
What that say?
Oh, is that Ohio State?
The Ohio State University, the reigning national champions, my alma mater. And just real quick, just want to let you know we got it here too. So just want to, because you from Pennsylvania, you know how we do. We're gonna beat y'all down again this year.
Oh man.
Go right ahead, brother.
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Yeah, but yeah, I'm always the one to lean towards, the person who has an expertise in a particular subject and the credentials to back it up, like a PhD. And but it's also good practice, at least in my opinion, to have opposite views by another one who's also credentialed as well academically on that particular subject. And I bring it up to say because I believe Dr. Claude Anderson believes in delineation. I,
Mhm.
I just checked in not too long ago, and I don't know if y'all had already covered this topic.
So let me say this: Dr. Claude Anderson is not an African Americanist, meaning he's not someone who studies African American history, like history and culture. Dr. Claude Anderson is not a anthropologist. When I read Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Black Labor, White Wealth, in the book he stated that African Americans did not have an actual culture, right? Which is not true whatsoever. So I would look at his expertise in terms of the financial issues in the Black community, not in terms of issues in terms of ethnicity, culture, so on and so forth, because that is not his field of inquiry.
Okay, well, he says that the delineation process should stay in effect due to the reparations. So they're saying that
But here's the thing. And so once again, and be easy. I saw your chat. No problem. I hope you subscribe. You're always welcome here. No one has ever stated that people who aren't African Americans, who are descendants of chattel enslavement, should receive reparations. That's never even been an argument. The only people that we have a history in this country of trying to receive benefits for groups that they are not part of are white people. It's what we call the $5 Indian. So
right.
once again, this is it's almost like these are individuals who are being co-opted, right, into actually fighting against groups that aren't even trying to fight against them. The only group that has a history that I could think of in this country of seeking out benefits for a group that they aren't part of are white people.
Mm.
Not
Well,
other Black.
well, I believe in negotiations for reparations. With Claude Anderson will say that because this there isn't a delineation in this fog between people who are descendants of chattel slavery and people who are migrated here on their own will, that's going to be a reason for the government not to pay the descendants of
No,
chattel
no, it's
slavery.
not. No, it's not. That's complete. That's nothing more than bullshit. If the government isn't going to pay people reparations, it's because they don't want to honor what took place in doing chattel enslavement. It has nothing to do because they had them pay reparations before, and this wasn't an issue. So it's nothing
Right.
but bullshit, and it's nothing more than divide and conquer. And as I said before, since I can't defeat the person who's actually causing our problems, I'm gonna go attack somebody else. That's all that is. Because, like I said,
Yeah.
these are people. These are solutions in search of a problem. This has never even been an issue before. You can't name one Black person, like we said, Ilhan Omar. Her entire life, she's identified herself as Somali American. Now, all of a sudden, people are trying to say, well, she says she's African American. She's never claimed to be an African American. She's a Somali American. So these are people trying to create problems that don't even exist. So they don't have to address the real issues. So they don't have to address the lack of drinkable water in Flint. They don't have to address police genocide, miseducation, inadequate housing. Right? They don't have to address Black life. So we're going to make something else up to show so that we don't actually looking like the cowards that we actually are.
Can you give me just 1 second? I gotta help somebody here at the job with this particular mission real quick. I'll be back in like
No problem.
10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. So
All right.
that's what's really taking place here, family. That's what's really taking place. Right? We don't want to address any real issues that we're facing as a people, so we're going to make something up. Well, on the census, everyone's considered, Black. Well, that's the case for everyone. If that's an issue to take up with the United States government, not with other Black people, they have no control over that. Oh, well, when there's a crime, they say a black person. Same thing they say about anyone. White male was charged or indicted for grand larceny. They don't say, well, this Norwegian American. They do that with everyone. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Claude Anderson, he's an economist. He's not a historian or an anthropologist or an African Americanist. So, and part of it may be because of my academic training. So I know that. So I'm like, I'm not going to listen to this guy because I know he doesn't know what he's talking about. Right. So those are some of the issues that, and I've never, okay. I saw you brag about your trouble. Right. Yeah, but these are the real issues. So you don't have to address the real issues that actually adversely affect our community. You're trying to address issues that don't actually exist. Yeah. Right. We talk about Zoe Saldana, the actress. Okay, she's acting. They have people wear prosthetics when they're acting, but she's never claimed to be an African American. She's always claimed to be an Afro-Latino. What the French toast is the problem? Well, they have her playing these black roles. They do that with everyone. They have Robert Downey Jr. play a black guy in Tropic Thunder. It's called acting. Like, what the fuck is the problem? Right? So these are people, these are solutions in search of a problem. But the real issue is cowardice, political cowardice. So we don't have to address miseducation. I'm not going to go out and create a Julie Mosi Shule. We're not going to create a Saturday school. We're actually properly educating children. Right? We're not going to create a food pantry. Right? We're not going to engage in what's going on in my hometown right now. We're going to do a whole month where we're promoting anti-Black genocide. We're not going to address real issues that affect our community. We're not going to put ourselves in a position. No, I'm not familiar with Cali House. We're not going to put ourselves in positions where we're on some of these civilian review boards. So we're actually holding these race soldiers called police officers as accountable for what they're doing in our community. No, we're going to get on social media and do what? Just simply create a problem that doesn't even exist. This is called cowardice. Just keeping it a buck. It's called cowardice. Yeah, absolutely. And for example, and it's part of divide and conquer. You attack each other rather than the entity that created the problem. I remember when I was in undergrad, there was a sister who was being indoctrinated via feminism. And she came to me and said, I took this feminist class and they talked about how when we study Black history, most of the books are about Black men. And And one of the sisters was from Cleveland, said, "Sister, you are being manipulated. Bakari has no control over who wrote that textbook. So you have an actual problem with the fact that textbook doesn't highlight Black women and the work that they're doing in the Black community. You need to contact the publisher and the author. This is what happens when people are being manipulated. Right? This is nothing more than manipulation. That's all. It's nothing more than manipulation. Yeah, it's a solution in search of a problem. We're going to make someone else the problem so we don't have to actually address the real issues that affect us as a people. Yeah, we don't have to address food deserts, right? I've done that in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio. I was part of the Gem City Market Initiative where we actually create a grassroots full service grocery store in the Black community when West Dayton was a food desert. We're talking about doing real work that brings about tangible benefits for our people. Not saying, well, because someone's of a different nationality and ethnicity, they should be XYZ, right? Or if a person has a particular political frame of reference that we would argue is prone to being a spoon, as the brother said, then what takes place? They try to blame that on the person's nationality and ethnicity, not the person's political ideology or lack of political sophistication. There's nothing more than divide and conquer. Right. So these are things that we need to be aware of. And this is why I don't take individuals who ascribe to this doctrine or idea seriously. Because we have heard from no government official that if reparations were going to be paid, they would go to Black people who were not African Americans, who are descendants of, drum roll please, chattel enslavement in America. We haven't seen a government memo. There wasn't a meeting that leaked anything. This is just something someone came up with out the blue. Right? Well, this Kenyan guy said that we shouldn't receive reparations. Yeah, but this guy is also, he's a conservative who doesn't believe that anybody should receive reparations. D1, what's the word? You know what? I'm going to check that out. I appreciate that. Yeah. So this is just, like I said, it's just people making up problems. So they don't actually address real issues that take place that affect our community. They don't have to address miseducation. They don't have to address food deserts. They don't have to address police genocide, right? They don't have to address Black fratricide. They don't have to address what the financial issues in our community, right? No, we're just going to make up a problem that doesn't even exist. One brother said, well, there was a Ghanaian family down the street and they never talked to me. I said, okay, why do you care? Right? So once again, making up problems that don't even exist, rather than addressing issues that actually affect us on a daily basis. Sister Kenya Akbar, tap in and be part of the conversation. Shout out to the Gym City 937. Come in here, hold it down. Sister Kenya's part of the group in Dayton that's working on anti-genocide, doing real work in the community, not making up fights with other Black people. It's called what we like to call set tripping. She's part of the Dayton Africana Elders Council. I know she's at least affiliated with it. So tap in, Sister Kenya Akbar, right? We're talking about doing real work, not making up problems to act like you actually about that life. Come on, Sister Kenya Akbar. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. I got to get you up in here. Shout out to the 937 Gym City all day. Y'all know what it is. Dayton View, USA.
I'm back.
Okay, what's going on, Philly? Illadale, 215, talk to me.
Illadale, yeah, I was just on an on-site at this pharmaceutical company fixing the equipment, but yeah, just got back in town. But yeah, I mean, Dr. Claude Anderson, he said he used to work for he used to be a liaison to the federal government. And
that's what he said. Yeah,
that's what he said. I don't know how much of it's true, but you know, if there's like talkings that's getting talked about, you know, behind closed doors that we don't know about, and he has the inside scoop on what could be negotiated, what can't be negotiated, I would think that, you know, that's something that we would have to like at least leave no stone unturned, you know. Now I don't want to like, and it's a sensitive issue because of course, you know, you don't want to ostracize yourselves away from, you know, our brothers from the diaspora, because we're just cutting ourselves off unnecessarily, and internationally is going to make us weaker. But if there is some type of negotiations that are going on behind closed doors that they think could help our situation, then, you know, I'm open to allowing that to operate. Now, it's these buffoons in the FBA like a Tariq Nasheed, who have no scholarly background, and that other lady, the light-skinned lady, I can't recall her name.
Yvette Carnell.
And Yvette Carnell, who don't have the credentials or the background to speak on a lot of these topics, or they're not at the roundtable meetings discussing and negotiating on our behalf. So, you know, I just consider that all noise, and I think we should all take that with a grain of salt. But it's just a shame that, you know, people are trying to make money off of this delineation or this separation in between us as African Americans in the United States and the rest of the African diaspora. It's like we're constantly being taken advantage of, not only by outside forces, but people that's supposed to be a part of our group, you know. And it's a shame that it's happening that way. But I don't know. I mean, Africa is segregated too. You know, they don't segregate by race; they segregate by tribe.
Well, you know, the proper term is ethnic group here, Mr. Sandman.
Oh yeah. Or yeah, they delineate themselves by ethnic group. So, can we consider the descendants of chattel slaves in the United States as their own ethnic group?
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, most scholars argue that African Americans are a distinct ethnic group, but just like Afro Jamaicans, Afro Haitians, etc. One of the issues, and Dr. Kwame Nkrumah stated this, that if we are vulgarly ethnic or nationalist in our politics, we'll be played against each other like pawns on the chessboard. He said this, and this is playing out today, right? But real quick, Sister Kenya, I hope you could tap in. I don't know if you want to turn your camera on or not, but Sister Kenya is an example of someone who's actually doing the work, right? Not someone who's on social media trying to create problems that don't exist. So I wanted to give you a platform to discuss with brothers and sisters. Okay, she may need to tap back in what she's doing in the city to tangibly improve the lives of our brothers and sisters in Dayton, Ohio. So, okay, she's back. We may be having some technical difficulties.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Okay, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing quite all right. How are you?
I'm fine. I see you over here going off. What's going on?
That would be good. So the argument I've made is that when we find individuals seeking to infight amongst Black people based on nationality or ethnicity, they tend not to be actually doing any real work to improve the lives of Black people where they actually are.
Correct. That I don't even allow, honestly, I don't even allow them to be a distraction. Like, I feel like we're so distracted. This is the reason why we don't have all of the development and the utilities that we need in order to manifest as the powerhouses that we are as a Black community. Like, it's time that we just stop being distracted by them. We need to be organizing. Again, we've been told by our leaders and our ancestors time and time again, organize, organize, organize. And I'm not spending any time with the buffoonery, those people that are selling out, that are steadily supporting status quo. I'm not even spending time with them anymore. Because at the end of the day, if you're not renaming territories, if you're not spending time with youth, developing character and morals, if you're not boots on the ground, I'm more than a song.
Well, and I want you to talk about that. So you talk about renaming territory, so we could talk about the park that you all renamed, and then talk about boots on the ground, because so in Detroit they had the organization just launched the chapter in Dayton. Talk about that.
Yes, so I'm part of New Era Nation. New Era Nation is a 16-chapter organization started back in 2014, August 17th, in Detroit, Michigan, by a brother named Zeke Williams. And what he initially envisioned with New Era were Black people getting out basically and supporting themselves by door-to-door canvassing, passing out love, resources, and most importantly, galvanizing the community, getting individuals to know that you're not alone and we need to move collectively. And so he started that back in August 17th, 2014. And like I said, now he's up to 16 chapters. We have one in Nigeria. We have them in Baltimore, Vegas, Cleveland, Atlanta, Birmingham, Alabama. So we have them all over the country. And what we do is we get out into the community and these actions called Hood to Hoods, where we go door to door and we actually make contact with community citizens, find out what their needs are, find out if they're where they need to be based off of a 5-point accountability.
Hold on, real quick, sister. So you said you all are going door to door. You're not on social media. You're not on TikTok.
We on social
You're not
media
on Twitter.
too. We on all of it. We do it all. Like, I see these people.
But you actually boots on the ground is what you're saying.
We out there every day. Like yesterday, we was up in the square. Like, we out in the community every other day, once a week for sure. You know what I'm saying? Once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month. We outside. we outside.
And you're outside in a good way. I said outside in a good way.
Outside in the best way, because this is what it's going to take. The kingdom of heaven suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. It's going to take us to help us. Like, this is what it's going to take. Iron sharpen iron. We got to get out there. You fight fire with fire. You got to get out there, though. You all that, taking the back door and showing up at an event for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, that's not action. You sitting in all these boardrooms and going into all these offices and making decisions about millions of dollars that are not going into the Black community. Like I told somebody today, we cannot continue to expect our youth to listen to us when they go over to the white communities and they have skating rinks and jump houses and flag zones and bowling alleys. They can't do nothing in West Dayton, where the predominant community is Black. They can't do anything but go to a water park that doesn't even have the proper water pressure. There's nothing they can do within their city of Dayton. But guess what? I'm not going to expect somebody to do something for the youth that haven't even done something for themselves. Our city doesn't have not one single golf course. Every Black golf course was shut down. And if you love golf and there's no place to golf in your city and you are the mayor, I don't expect you to do anything at all besides
you talking about memes. I know you're talking about,
I be trying not to name drop, but listen
I
to
know.
me.
But I'm gonna do it.
When you can take pounds and pounds and pounds of asphalt and put speed bumps up, but you can't fill in potholes, you trying to slow people down as usual. And that's our issue in the Black community. We so slowed down. That's the whole thing. You tearing up these main streets and making bike trails. For what? Like, that's
gentrification.
That's not what the community is saying that they want. Like, and we're not stupid. And the messaging is clear because you tore down the raceway that was up on Gettysburg and Germantown and you put a prison. So we need to understand the messaging as well. Like, don't sleep on the messaging because the messaging has been clear. But I think people have just forgotten. I was reading Margaret Peter's book. Margaret Peter wrote an excellent book about African Americans, Blacks, whatever we want to call it.
I got the book too,
in Dayton. And if you read that, you'll really understand the laws that were in place that was saying you can't, forgive my French, but your Black ass can't even come here unless 2 white people sign for you with a $500 bond. Like, understand where we came from, because I think that we've now created so much distance, unfortunately, because of the lapse in communication between generations. We've not gotten the stories properly in order to understand that right now we are living in a situation that's based off of privileges. It's not based off of rights, because if it was based off of rights, we would understand.
You're on point. Martin Delaney said the same thing. He said, we're not citizens, but denizens. We're here based on privilege, not based on rights. We don't have any rights. We're here based on a privilege.
Hallelujah. And I am 1000%. Most people don't even know who Martin Delaney is. They only know Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Martin Luther King. Those people that's been taught in the schools. And they're not even going to teach them anymore. Like,
and the reason why I asked you to come on is to show everyone this is what real work looks like, right? You have these individuals come on, they want to create problems that don't exist. They're not actually doing any work. There was a time, and most of you all know Dynasty Mia, when he had me come on his show, somebody said, well, what work are you doing? They asked everyone on the platform, what work are you doing? So I just said what I was doing in the community, boots on the ground. No one else wanted to answer the question because they weren't actually doing anything. They just get on YouTube, get on the computer, and then just talk about stuff. They're not actually doing anything.
Baby, listen to me. I got so sick of people talking the talk and not walking the walk. I had a drill team that I had been coming for our Nation Day when all of the chapters from New Era come down to Dayton. Our chapter's been established since 2023. I was paying them an honorarium of $500 every time they appeared. They didn't appear this year. You know what I did? In response to them not appearing, I started my own drill team. And you know the difference between the one that I started and the one that these people are running? I pay my children. My children make $10 an hour for every hour as a stipend for them coming and having the opportunity to exercise, basically, and create dances, and then to perform. And they'll be performing at Good Trouble. They've been asked to perform on July 17th at the Courthouse Square. Anybody that's available from 5:30 to 7, come out. We're going to be talking about John Lewis and the work he did and giving him some remembrance and appreciation. And the drill team, the New Era World Steppers, will be performing. So please come out if y'all have time. We're also going to be in Southern Dayton View this Saturday from 12 to 3 over in the Princeton area. We're going to be walking door to door, passing out some toys because we want children to get back to being outside. And
That's right.
and enjoying fresh air. We need to stop acting like we're vampires. We're not the ones that burn up in the sun.
Right.
We can go outside, get some melanin, enrich our vitamins. There's certain vitamins you only can get from the sun. Stop staying in the house all the time. You're going to make yourself sick.
Absolutely. So family, and I asked Sister Kenya to come on. You know, as you know, I'm in California now. I'm not in Dayton anymore. But to show you, this is what real work looks like. This is what real work looks like. Right. And I tell people all the time, you know, when I'm talking my trash, it ain't about how many faults you had, it's who you fought. You know what I mean? And most of these cats, as I say, they're Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant. Homie, they just talk a good fight. They just talk a good fight. Right?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you got to be about it. Like that 15,000 square foot grocery store that we built because we're living, and it's not a food desert, it's a food apartheid. A food desert food desert implies that God did it. Okay, watch the language. Watch what they do into our mindsets. It's not a desert. It's an apartheid. When you intentionally divest grocery stores from communities where you know, as I can tell you, because I've knocked on doors and I've talked to these residents, people don't have transportation. So when you divest and take grocery stores out of that area, stores like Aldi's, who said in the New York Times they never intended on selling to inner city residents. They only wanted to get their foundation there. They completely usurped all of their stores from the inner city neighborhoods, and now they're all in the suburban areas, and the stores are a step up in echelon and in quality and aesthetics than they were in the West Dayton community. But this is what these stores do, and you need to be aware of that. So I wanted just to make sure that me and several other community members got together, started meeting, and put together a grocery store, 15,000 square foot grocery store, community owned. We have 5,000 plus members. And then, as you were speaking of earlier, 2 blocks down, we want to make sure that we're building critical mass and doing a lot in single areas so that it explodes with movement activity. We renamed the park Liberation Park.
That's right.
Brother named Mike Motley, awesome brother, Panther from back in the days. He worked diligently aside of me with some other community members, and we renamed that park Liberation Park and had the gazebo redone in red, black, and green. So just really making monumental steps on the geography, because understand too, Dayton has a history. The first NFL football game was played here, but you'll never know it because the grounds is now, it was then and is currently a cemetery for Native Americans that are buried there. So they cannot do anything on that ground because that ground is considered sacred. So you'll never hear that, but you do your research. First
I'm
NFL
familiar with
game.
The Dayton Triangles. Yeah.
That's right. That's
Absolutely.
right. You know, I know you educated, brother.
Yeah. But so real quick, I see brother Kevin, aka Mr. K, says, I've been saying if rappers use beef to sell records, why wouldn't monetize content creators use beef for clicks and views on social media? I think you're right there. Black Canadian 93 says, hope all is going well. It is. As a Black Canadian, I don't get this FBA ADOS thing. Black Canadians literally come from the whole diaspora, so we don't have these dumb diaspora wars in Canada. When these FBA's ADOS tell stories about being victimized by Black immigrants, the details are so vague that is like a story of the boy that cried wolf. Right. So these are, like I said, these are really situations where individuals, I said, it's almost like being on the playground growing up. And they may be like the neighborhood or the school bully. But you want to save face that you're not a punk. So you're going to start a fight with someone that you believe you can beat, rather than taking on the person who's actually causing the problem. The same way here, where you don't want to take on what the anti-Black establishment, you don't want to take on them folks down at City Hall. You want to take on them folks down at the police department. You don't want to take on what the school system has miseducation our children. So you're going to try to deflect into what is it? The real issue is somebody over here that ain't got nothing to do with what's going on. It's called cowardice. That's all it is. I used to box. I know what it's like. People see the big guy. Nah, I'm gonna try to spar with this other dude over here who's really a novice and don't know what he's doing. And then when I beat him, I can look like I'm a real one. Yeah. Or the big guy comes in the gym. Okay, I see you, but later, but saying, man. Then all of a sudden, I got an injury today. My elbow ain't acting right. I said, I've been boxing since I was 12. I know what this is. It's the same thing. I got an elbow injury. You know what I'm saying? I ain't feeling really good today. Coach, you know, every day we spar on Tuesday and Thursday. You know that. All of a sudden, Lumumba come in, man, I got an issue. Same situation. But yeah, you're right. Brother Dwayne Omawale, who you know is a resident historian, he talked about this. Oftentimes, if people are trying to gain notoriety and popularity in social media, they do so by just attacking other Black people. That's typically what they do. They just attack another Black person. They get a lot of views, uptick in subscribers, and now they've made a name for themselves, but they haven't actually done anything to actually benefit the community in any real or tangible way. And that's the problem. The work that we do is to better, particularly the material conditions of our people. Material conditions of our people, right? And that doesn't happen. So we don't just address the issues that are affecting them on a diurnal basis, and hopefully Sister Kenya can tap back in, but we also try to make sure we setting our children, our young people up for success as adults. That's why we had the Saturday school with the West Dayton Youth Task Force, where I was getting my behind up on a Saturday morning, dragging myself down there to Mama Renee's studio at 8 o'clock in the morning and working with young people, reading, writing, arithmetic, African history, African dance, having them play chess to develop critical thinking, volunteering in schools, right? So that we can help address these issues, right? In a tangible way, right? Rather than just trying to create beefs with non-Black people, Black people from other countries and different nationalities. Let me see here, it says it speaks in Rocky 3 where Mickey handpicked opponents for Rocky that were good, but not the best top 5 contenders, just to make Rocky's title victories the Trump triumph. Yes, it's called matchmaking. Absolutely. You would know, I know I'm a big boxing movie fan. Absolutely. It's called matchmaking. You know what I mean? So I'm going to pick out an opponent who actually I know I can beat. Right? Like I said, the brother that tapped in, I appreciate him tapping in. Hopefully he would come back. Big Easy, but we talk about Ilhan Omar. Right. And I said, she's Somali American. She's always identified as Somali American. I said, if you go on her congressional page, it says Somali American. But he's like, but she's from Africa. Right. But she's still Somali American. So like I said, trying to create issues that don't actually exist in order to somehow address a problem that doesn't affect us in any real or actual tangible way. So once again, I asked Sister Kenya to tap in, and she did, because I wanted to provide an example. I appreciate you, Mr. Sandman. But actually, you are putting boots on the ground, Mr. Sandman, because you're raising a family from an African-centered frame of reference, right? So your children have a healthy understanding of who they are from a social, political, economic frame of reference that aren't going to have identity issues in which they have an unhealthy racial identity that causes them to engage in racially disempowering and self-destructive behavior. You have an actual family, so you're able to model what a healthy relationship looks like for your children, so they could go out and create healthy families that benefit our community on a macro level. You actually are doing the work. Boots on the ground. Sister Kenya, I wasn't there at the wedding, but I'm familiar with the wedding. They had what I would view to be an African-centered wedding, right? So now we're bringing in these healthy views of who and who we are as a people. It was public, so the community can see that, hey, we're having an African-centered union. We're proud of who we are as a people. That's a representation for young people, so they can actually believe in the institution of marriage again. Right, yeah. So we're doing the boots. Sometimes we got to sit back and give ourselves credit. You're doing the work, right? Where we model the behavior, right? I've had brothers here at Sex, they say, man, I'm so glad that you're here. You're nothing like what we thought you were. We thought you was going to be one of those conservative PhDs who wear a bow tie every day and and married to a white woman. I said, oh, no, I'm as Black as it get. I'm a real one. But I said, I know, because when I was at the Ohio State University, the majority of Black people I met, they were racially Black and culturally white. Blew my mind. I call Dr. Barbara Chalmers every week, like, you won't believe what's going on up here. I need someone to talk to. And I'm like, man, I don't know if I do this. And Bible Coach said, no, we need someone like you in a place like that to help give our students an African-centered frame of reference. You're going to have to tough it up. You're going to have to dog it out.
I know you heard about them extracting the DEI money and taking away the Belinga Center at Wright State.
Yeah. Mama Nazebo texted me about it, and then I called. Yeah. Absolutely. So once again, I'm glad you brought that up. That goes to the example I stated. So the actual individuals who are taking money that's supposed to go to the Black community aren't Black immigrants, right? It's white folk, right? I said the only group of people in this country that have a history of taking resources that's allocated for particular communities and providing it for themselves are white people, right? One of the greatest examples of that is the book written, it's titled When Affirmative Action Was White, right? Where they have the history of doing that. Not our brothers and sisters from the continent of the Caribbean, right? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we need to be cognizant of. That's why Tariq is ducking you like Rocky Duck Club of Lane, right? And I'm not like a big debater type person, you know, but once again, Brother Dwayne was like, part of our job is, unfortunately, we have to do the work, but also we have to take time to address the misinformation that's being provided, you know, and you can't do it all the time, because if you're always addressing the misinformation, you won't actually be doing the work. But he said, hey, at times we have to do this, because there are individuals who oftentimes are unfortunately confused and being manipulated, and unfortunately don't want to work with Black people just because we know this in our community, maybe just from another neighborhood, let alone another country. So these are some of the issues that we have to address as a people, right? Some of the issues that we have to address as a people. But like I said, individuals who are doing the real work, they're boots on the ground. They are boots on the ground. I've been part of an initiative where we were doing back to school supplies. So listen, children show up, we give them a pep talk back to school, and they leave with what we would call sometimes a swag bag, which was a book bag full of school materials, right? Right, just doing the work. So that's what's most important, family. But Sister Kenya, I'm going to give you the last word, and then we're going to log off. So yeah, we're having some technology issues, but yeah, I'm going to give you the last word.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's just you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah, it's breaking up on us. So yeah, we're having some technical difficulties, but family, once again, I appreciate everyone. Go ahead.
Okay. I just was going to say I want to thank everyone for finding this conversation important and critical. And please take action. Remember, love is an action word. We can't say we love our community, we love ourselves, but we don't take action. Take action and organize. That is our power. Our power is in organizing. Talk with your community members, find out what they need, what they want, and then make sure that you guys are organizing in order to deliver it. Trust me when I tell you that we can have a much more advanced society if we, as the real people of this earth, the mothers and fathers of this earth, the melanated people, step up, galvanize, and operate in solidarity. Thank you all for having me. And
No
peace.
problem. No problem. Anytime, family. Y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Until next time, peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on Black. Peace.